On Tuesday, October 8th, I went to a meeting at the World Bank and listened with growing disappointment to a presentation entitled Taxing Wealth for Equity and Growth, supposedly focused on Latin America and the Caribbean region. The entire presentation was a broad brush approach that lumped Caribbean countries with Latin America, paying no attention to their essential differences and therefore the need for different approaches. I've come to expect this distortion from all global financial institutions. It seems that the Caribbean is too small to matter, except when the international financial institutions want to place constraints on initiatives for achieving social stability through financial incentives. So I was more disturbed about the paucity of data presented about Caribbean countries and the lack of any analysis on the sub-region in this latest report. Neither the October 8th presentation nor the full report, released on October 9th, provided any reason for optimism that the World Bank is addressing the real challenges of promoting equity and growth in the Caribbean. The report is a forerunner to discussions expected at the bank's annual upcoming meeting toward the end of October. It focused solely on taxing wealth for equity and growth and ignored the measures that CARICOM states have long advocated as essential to achieving these goals. The report fails to mention critical measures, such as adopting the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index as a criterion for concessional financing, a proposal actively advocated by small island developing states and CARICOM at various global fora. It also ignored the arguments for debt relief through mechanisms such as forgiveness and restructuring, which remain vital to the region as Caribbean nations continue to struggle with high debt burdens. The report also overlooks the urgent need for improved recovery windows for climate-related disasters. Despite irrefutable evidence of the disastrous effects of climate change, there was no mention of the Caribbean's vulnerability to extreme weather events exacerbated by climate change. Instead, the report focuses only on taxing wealth and property as the means for achieving equity and growth. Taxing wealth is an idea being championed by the leaders of Brazil and France. They propose a 2% levy on the world's 3,000 billionaires. However, as of 2024, Latin America and the Caribbean together have only 153 billionaires, with Brazil alone accounting for 68 and Mexico for 20. CARICOM countries likely have very few billionaires. Most of the wealth in the Latin American and Caribbean region is concentrated in larger Latin American economies. For instance, Carlos Slim of Mexico, with a fortune of $102 billion, and Eduardo Saverin of Brazil, with $28 billion, dominate the region's billionaire rankings. A 2% tax on such a small number of individuals would hardly generate significant revenues, even for countries in which these billionaires pay taxes. In small Caribbean nations like Antigua and Barbuda, it is unlikely that any billionaires exist. Therefore, a tax on billionaires is simply a waste of legislative and regulatory time. The report then shifts its focus to taxing property, claiming that it is a relatively fixed and easily identifiable asset. This aspect of the report reveals a serious disconnection between the bank and the historical, social, and cultural realities of Caribbean societies. A legacy of slavery, indentured labor, and worker exploitation left the majority of people in the subregion with little or no property, though owning a piece of the rock and a home remains a deeply ingrained aspiration of all Caribbean people. Since gaining independence, CARICOM governments have made it a priority to encourage land ownership and home ownership. Increasing property taxes now would undermine this policy, potentially stripping away from many persons the very properties they worked so hard to acquire. So neither of these prescriptions, taxing billionaires and taxing property, will result in equity and growth in the Caribbean. Alarmingly, the report also asserts that the Latin American and Caribbean region is close to vanquishing inflation and that lower interest rates will ease stress on households and banking sectors, potentially spurring economic growth. While this observation may be true for some Latin American countries, such as Brazil and Peru, it ignores the unique causes of inflation in Caribbean nations. Most Caribbean countries have to import basic commodities from the region's largest trading partner, the United States. With each import, Caribbean countries are importing US inflation, including subsidized agricultural products with which local farmers cannot compete. Furthermore, Caribbean countries, excluded as they are from concessional financing from the institutions like the World Bank, are forced to borrow on the international commercial market, where interest rates remain high. So once again, because of its broad brush approach to development, the World Bank has neglected the realities in Caribbean countries and has suggested irrelevant pathways to equity and growth. In the end, the Caribbean cannot afford to be lumped together with much larger and fundamentally different economies. Our realities are unique, our challenges distinct, and yet we are constantly and consistently overlooked. If global institutions like the World Bank continue to offer one-size-fits-all solutions, the inequities will deepen, and the progress we so desperately need will remain out of reach. The time for tailored, thoughtful action is long overdue. The World Bank should get on with it.